Okay, I gave you another video about the ideal of courtly love, and as an example of the medieval romance, uh, embodying that, I gave you an excerpt from Lancelot that's referred to actually in that video. And while she's right that it does portray a double betrayal, Lancelot is supposed to be serving the king, not servicing the queen, and Guinevere is betraying her marriage vows to King Arthur. Look at the tone that the author takes towards what's going on between them, and see how that fits in with that code of courtly love. The second thing in that reading on courtly love is an example of a poem with a common theme in the Middle Ages, a love that is not returned. I'll let you look at the poem and see why this love cannot be physically consummated. But you need to understand what that ideal was about, and it's the analogy of refining gold. Gold doesn't come out of the ground looking like this. It's streaks and flecks embedded in rock. And the way that you separate the gold from what's called the dross is heat. Put it in a kiln, blast oven, and it gets really, really hot, and the gold melts, and it actually sinks. The rock will float to the top where it's skimmed off. Okay. Now, what does that have to do with love? Well, one of the things that happens to both genders when we are aroused is heat. And the idea was, if that heat is not given physical release, sex, it builds up hotter and hotter and hotter and burns away all that is earthly within your soul. So it purifies you. It makes you better and nobler than you would otherwise be. Now, who above all others in the Middle Ages was a woman with whom a man could fall in love and know there's no chance they're ever going to bed with her? No, not the queen. It looks like Lancelot got some from her. But the person I'm thinking of is a queen, was thought of as a queen, but not an earthly queen, the Queen of Heaven, the Virgin Mary, in Latin, Notre Dame, Our Lady. And yeah, that anglicizes to the Catholic University in South Bend, Indiana. Mary was the Queen of Heaven. In Catholic tradition, Mary remains perpetually virgin, like a nun. Protestant Christians tend to assume that at least after the birth of Jesus, Mary and Joseph acted like most married people do, but that's not Catholic teaching. And remember, in the Middle Ages, everybody's Catholic. There are no other churches. And then, of course, she's been dead for 1,000 years by now. You see how we've gone from talking about romance to talking about religion? In the Middle Ages, the boundary between romantic love and spiritual love was very thin. Basically, it boiled down to, does the relationship get physically consummated? The last reading I gave you is part of a sermon by a medieval mystic called Bernard of Clairvaux, based on a verse in the Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon. Let him kiss me with the kiss of his mouth. And he takes this, look at how he takes this, who the bride and bridegroom represent, because he reads it as an allegory, where it's not a human couple. And he talks about 3 kisses: to kiss the feet of Christ in penitence for your sins. But what good to have your sins forgiven if you commit them all over again? And so the second kiss is to kiss his hand as he lifts you up out of your sinfulness. Only then can you say, "Let him kiss me with the kiss of his mouth." Now, I've got a reading on mysticism that I want you to look at. We'll look at it again when we get to some of the Sufi mystics, or we looked at it already in some of the Sufi mystics, depending on which class you're in. And think about why mystics tend to use sexual imagery to communicate what they want to say about the relationship with God.